Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 3 of the New Fashion Conservatives podcast. I'm your host, Justin Phillips. Along with me, as always, Shadow Governor Voss.
Robin Voss's strongest soldier.
And we're here to talk more about Wisconsin state politics. But first, let's give a shout out to all the listeners. I was so surprised and so heartened by all of the comments, texts, Facebook messages, what have you. I was really, really happy to see it. And, I think that's really what kept us going. I know I was texting you this Tuesday, worried that we weren't going to have any content for this episode. And of course, the state legislature delivered. And we have more content than we could possibly get through in one episode.
Well, this is why I love living in Wisconsin, is because we are the center of the political universe a lot of the time, between us and Pennsylvania. But there is a lot to talk about, and what better way to start about it than the month of June being a classic favorite of the left's, as in Pride Month.
Not Dairy Month.
Not Dairy Month. Although the Republicans, celebrate Dairy Month, leftists and demons celebrate Pride Month. So we have a lot to talk about, but I thought we would start there. If you want to, break us in, I know that Dan O'Donnell kind of started things off.
Yeah. So shout out to him for, I think he broke the story. But earlier this week, Governor Evers' Chief of Staff Maggie Gao, as well as Democrat state legislators Mark Spreitzer and Francesca Hong, threatened to pull funding for Wisconsin's Historical Society over its decision not to fly the pride flag, which seems like we called them the Alphabet Mafia last week. It's exactly what they're doing here. It's a awful nice historical society you got here. It'd be a shame if we decide to pull funding for not doing this one specific thing, because as we know, if you go to Old World Wisconsin, what you really need to see there is not how people lived in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, but a pride flag.
Correct. And I think it's even more interesting is, so Dan O'Donnell broke this part of the story, but there was a Journal Sentinel article about this. They did not include Dan's reporting, which
not.
I understand, but maybe they could have followed up on maybe some of his sources or something, but that's neither here nor there. The Journal Sentinel article was talking about the CEO of the Historical Society, and I thought it was interesting that the CEO had been there since 2018. Mm-hmm. The Historical Society had only been flying the pride flag since 2019. So this CEO has been there for every single year that they have flown the pride flag previously. So what changed? And obviously, I think 2024, November happened, which reset a lot of things. But I just thought it was very interesting that the CEO, who's done this multiple times, has said, okay, we're going to stop. We're not going to do it this year. And of course, met some certain backlash from the Democrats.
Yeah, I think, for the longest time, there was just a tacit agreement that June was Pride Month. We get it. And there could be organizations that would, celebrate that. Pride Fest is in downtown Milwaukee. It's been there for a very long time. But in the past few years, it really seems like there's been this cultural rot. And part of it is looking at stores like Target going all in on pride and trans to a just alarming degree, especially in the kids sections of those stores. And I think with the election of President Trump and just kind of the backlash from that, I feel like a lot of those organizations feel like they went too far and they're going to take those steps back now. And, maybe someone is at the Historical Society. I think they have a board that has legislators serving on it. That maybe they just said, hey, don't forget that, Republicans go to the Historical Society, Republicans go to Old World Wisconsin too. And we want to, don't have to throw that in people's faces. Mm-hmm.
And I think the interesting thing about this story, though, of course, is the Party of Tolerance, trademarked, 2018. They pressured a person that has clearly supported them in the past and probably still does. If you go to the Historical Society's Facebook page, I'm pretty sure they have a section dedicating LGBTQ Wisconsinites for the month. So this isn't like they're totally capitulating. It's just on the flag,
It's just a single issue, and you got to fly the flag.
which of course isn't even owned by this historical society. It's actually owned by UW-Madison's ROTC program. So that's another factor that they didn't bring into account. But of course, the Journal Sentinel articles talked about the fact of this letter from these employees of the Historical Society that were felt threatened or what have you. Enter any leftist jargon you want for that. But of course, this was orchestrated by, allegedly, by the governor's chief of staff because there aren't more pressing issues
The other,
facing.
the other shadow governor in the state, Maggie Gao.
Correct. We don't like to. I don't like to give her that moniker because there's only one shadow governor, and I just love that they thought they were being so funny and calling him some bat, and they made it so based. But yes, the other shadow governor, the one who actually runs the governor's office, along with another member of the LGBTQ caucus and Mark Spreitzer, Francesca Hong. I don't know what. I think she's straight. Maybe she leans both ways.
She just has to be on these issues because being not. I mean, we know she's a hyper progressive Marxist leftist,
Socialist caucus,
but she does represent that part of Madison where she needs to be that. And if she doesn't toe this line 100% of the time, I'm sure there's someone waiting in the wings ready to knock her out.
Yeah.
So it's just naked a political stunt for her.
Well, she has to inject herself in every bit of the leftist cause. And of course, her district, now I'm not sure with the lines moving, it's pretty much the area around the Capitol, which I think probably had all of 5 Schimmel voters probably in a number of precincts of, if a precinct of 2,000, I think there was only a handful of Schimmel voters. So basically her district is the, Madistan, as many like to coin it. But the craziness did not stop at the Historical Society.
No.
Just, what was it? Was it Friday?
Yes.
It was
Thursday or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Scott Kelly for putting this out there that the Risser Justice Center removed the Wisconsin flag and replaced it with a pride flag. Now, I understand organizations having that pride flag. You see it downtown at the Summerfest grounds when there's Pride Fest. I get it. The governor wants to pull a stunt and put the flag up. Fine. But this is actually removing a state flag. And that should draw a lot of concern for anyone.
Yeah, and I put this out on Twitter as well, that I'm assuming Democrats would do this if they didn't have any political blowback, where they would replace the state flag, the United States flag. They would replace any flag and just put the LGBTQ flag is the flag of leftism. It is what it is. They keep on adding more stripes. They keep on adding the feathers. I mean, they're gonna have every group of the leftist cause on there at some point.
I mean, that just speaks to leftism and progressivism. You're constantly trying to shoehorn.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And how do you keep up with it? If you have just a straight up rainbow flag, you're probably offensive to a part of the pride community because you don't have the circle or the extra triangles or the 2 spirit feathers, which seems a little bit
Culturally appropriating.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Well, it's exhausting to be a leftist and constantly keep up with the newest pronouns, what the newest progress flag looks like. And I don't know if they would get chastised, but hey, there's a new flag out. You should probably update it, or maybe just put the old one away. So I just think it's very fitting that the Democrats would willingly put away the Wisconsin flag and erect this abomination. And again, they would love to do this everywhere they can. I think they would make the excuse, well, there's only technically 2 flagpoles on the building, so one of them has to come down, which that should tell you everything. We only need 2 flags. Of course, we have the POW one as well that often gets flown at the Capitol and such, and, across other government buildings. So that's not surprising, but that shouldn't be an excuse to take down the state flag and erect this one, which of course only represents a small group of people, whereas the state flag, the United States flag, represents everybody.
100%.
And that's what flags are supposed to be
Exactly.
about. It's supposed to represent those groups. And There's of course the Gadsden flag. I got a Gadsden flag. I like it, but I'm not flying it above the United States flag because the United States flag should be at the top.
Exactly.
So it's very sad. I'm not surprised by it at all. I'm surprised they don't do it more, honestly.
Yep. And speaking of, looking at the LGBTQ caucus, they did introduce a whole slate of bills this week. Interestingly enough, went on Wheeler Report, tried to read about them, tried to find out what were actually in the bills, but none of the sponsors linked to those bills, which to me seems a little suspicious. That if you're going to put your name on these bills, you're going to highlight them. Shouldn't you at least tell us what's in them? Because my understanding is, and again, shout out to some of the folks on Twitter doing the heavy lift here, but one is discriminatory, another one violates the Fifth Amendment of the accused, and just a whole bunch of bills that, when one of them removes the word mother.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate, and I believe Dan O'Donnell had also pointed this out too, is when they were originally announcing these bills, and I know we talked about it just a little bit just in our first long-form interview, but the Wisconsin Democrats had an interesting pastor help introduce their LGBTQ legislation, Vicar Henrietta Steele. That's a real name. Well, it's a made-up name of someone that is a real person, refers to herself as a, quote, queer street preacher and moonlights as a drag performer known as Mother Scandalish, which... Are you kidding me? And if you see the picture, I don't know if you saw...
I did.
Okay,
I did.
You did see it. Okay.
But, again, it's that they have to take it to that extreme degree. There are actual LGBT pastors at actual parishes for various parts of left-wing Christianity.
Which is kind of an oxymoron in my opinion.
But they could have got someone that's just like 10% more normal, and they would have been taken 10% more serious.
They could have gotten an actual female pastor to come, but no, they had to pick the
someone
man
that
with a red crop top vestment with a beret on. I mean, what are we kidding ourselves?
It should be an insult to Christians, even of the moderate, of course the conservative, but
100%.
even of the moderate. Like that level of insult to Christianity is what puts me over the top and, makes it harder for a lot of people to get behind what they're doing. Even people who aren't political or moderate going to look at that and be like, that's too far left.
That's too far. And of course, to make it worse, Dan O'Donnell had also said that this pastor, quotes, is, a drag performer as well. And unfortunately, he had to post some pictures. I don't know if you saw those as well.
I think I tried to avoid them.
But I saw it, so you have to see it as well.
Come on.
And of course, he's very scantily dressed, but he's wearing a vestment collar. So kind of just demean the whole thing. I mean, it's very unfortunate that some forms of Christianity have delved into this, which, in my opinion, I think leftism and Christianity are totally at odds. So for a leftist that's a Christian, it's just leftism with extra steps. Why would I obey God when I can be my own God and do whatever I want? But that's a whole nother discussion. So I thought it was very interesting that they introduced the legislation, and that was their poster child.
Yep.
So, and of course they had all the representatives around, and they did a nice kumbaya about the legislation. But yeah, I believe the bill that got the most attention was kind of inseminated persons 2.0, but to a lesser degree, where they removed mother and just did breastfeeding person,
chest feeders,
which, and I will have to see what the actual language looks like when it comes out. But I think obviously there were some legislators that were talking about it and removing it 300 times and just erasing any distinction between male and female. It's just, a continual eroding of what is right and wrong. And I'm not surprised by it, but it just, when it constantly comes up, I have to pinch myself to think that this thing is even real in today's age.
Yep. And, I know they're going to come out and they're going to get a lot of press to start, and hopefully the legislature, the Republicans in charge, tamp these things down before they get too far. But unfortunately, there's no one in the press that's going to force Tony Evers to answer these questions. So, I think this is hopefully the last we're going to hear about these bills. They're going to languish in a committee somewhere until the end of session, then they're going to die, and this will just be
and where they belong.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean, and I hope that this happens more this session, is the Democrats propose a lot of crazy bills.
Mm-hmm.
They have their one press conference, and then they're never talked about again.
Mm-hmm.
The Republican bills are obviously the ones that are most likely going to move forward, but we got to highlight these bills because if the Democrats ever get control, this is the first thing. I mean, I have to imagine that there's probably been some legislators that have been around in the minority for a long time and have been chomping at the bit and probably have all kinds of legislation lined right up. They could just launch right out the gate if they were ever to get a majority.
Yeah. So speaking of other bills that are going on right now and ones that are kind of languishing, read later this past week that the legislative Republicans and Joint Finance and Leadership have broken off talks on the budget with, they said Tony Evers. I doubt he was actually involved. If I had to guess, they broke off conversations with Evers' staff. But what really stood out to me and what frustrates me, and tell me if I'm wrong here,
Okay.
is the way it was phrased by Republican leadership was so conciliatory towards Governor Evers. We would like to thank Governor Evers and his staff for engaging in good faith negotiations by trying to reach consensus, or we have engaged in good faith negotiations with Governor Evers and his staff to establish an outline for a bipartisan state budget. To me, that sounds like Democrats light. And if we're going to go down the path where we're going to be Democrats light, that's why Republicans lost in 2006. That's why we got rhinos in 2008. And we were swept out until 2010. Just seems like, has the governor ever done anything in good faith? You look at the budget last year, or last session, 400-year tax increase because he Frankensteined a dash together. My comment would not be thanking him and his staff. It would be he's never been one to negotiate in good faith. There's no reason for us to continue these conversations. All he's asking for is tax increases. All he's asking for is spending increases on groups and sections of the state budget that probably don't need those increases. Mm-hmm. And I would have expected a stronger statement than thanking Governor Evers and his staff. And again, I don't think Governor Evers was actually involved. I mean, he's got his morning ice cream and his afternoon pickleball and his sundowning by 3 o'clock. I truly wonder if anyone from Joint Finance or Republican leadership saw Governor Evers more than once or twice in any of the budget negotiations. And again, it was handed over to someone who's also trying to shake down the Wisconsin Historical Society in Maggie Gao.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take, but the thing is any of them could be true. I do think that the legislature is put in a very difficult position regarding the lawsuits, regarding the line item veto. There are a lot of variables, and there is a little bit of a surplus, and how are we going to spend that? So trying to eliminate the variables as much as you can to try to get a budget that actually doesn't put us in the red, I think is important. So in my mind, because we don't know some of the outcomes of these lawsuits, and I would hope that the Supreme Court of Wisconsin gets their act together and actually, puts them out. And the end of the session for them is, this month, I believe. Mm-hmm. So we could be having those come out at any day, or they could delay it a couple of weeks to really drive the stake in the back of our in our backs here to make the budget process even that more difficult. So in my mind, when I see that, I see it as, okay, maybe we did a little bit more discussions than we did last session, or especially in his first term. And because we don't know the outcome of those court cases, maybe there's a chance that we can get a little bit of agreement. Mm-hmm. And because I do think that there are legislators who do want to get a tax cut passed. I mean, it's going to be, at this point, and especially if we don't get a Republican governor in this next gubernatorial election, we're going to still have the high taxes that we do now for a while.
Yep.
And we can't just come in one session and, let's do a flat tax. Everything will be fine, because that's just not how the real world works. Although Congress acts much different, like the blank checkbook they have, those states actually have to balance their books. So I think when I see the response, I see it as a way of leaving the door open maybe just a little bit in hopes of maybe actually getting something done and maybe actually being genuine.
Sure.
What I do think on the flip side, though, is Speaker Voss had given a statement on up front that I wanted to play just to get, because I think it tells a little bit of a different story. So I'm going to play that now.
Sounds good.
The governor says Republicans have refused to invest in public school education, child care counts, child care in the UW system. Did you not come to the table on that end?
That's a lie.
A lie.
Yeah, I mean, we're willing to do it, just not as much as he wanted. I mean, that's the difference. When you read that statement, it makes it sound like we were at zero. We weren't at zero on any of those topics, right? We tried to find a way to invest in childcare that actually went to the parents and to make sure that we weren't just having it go to businesses, right? We tried to find a way to look at education so that money would actually go back to school districts all across the state. It just wasn't enough for what he wanted. We found a way to get money into the UW for the first time in almost a dozen years, but because it wasn't as much as he wanted, he wasn't willing to take a smaller win.
What was your UW cap at? So, obviously not the 800 million they want.
I'm not going to get into every single detail, right? I mean, that's not my goal, but the whole idea is there was money in each of those buckets, right? For childcare, for K-12 education, and for the UW system. Now, you're going to see as we go through the budget, Republicans are going to have to put our ideas out there. They'll be in public, so you'll be able to see those. So will the citizens who are watching. And you'll see we're going to make investments in childcare. We're going to make investments in the K-12. We're going to talk about the UW system and how we can reform it. All those will be on the table as we go forward.
Yeah, that's a much stronger statement than what came out on that press release. So credit to Speaker Voss for doing that. You know, one of the things he touched on that is really intriguing to me is his comments on the UW system. I want to briefly shout out Jessica McBride for doing some real work on finding out how many H-1B visa holders are in professorships or are being paid by the university, and I think that's something that is cause for concern. We should let a little bit more news come out about that before we really dive into that one.
Yeah, and they redacted some of the. I think they redacted names. And I think they redacted a lot of information, but basically we got information that 400 plus professorships were given to these H-1Bs, and they weren't all like high level professorships. Like if you have a very niche area, okay. But there were also some like paying jobs that are like 60 or 70,000, which are very middle of the road, good paying jobs, but could potentially go to a Wisconsinite, I would think.
Right. But back to the speaker's comments, you know, I think you're right. He did take a stronger stance. You know, it's the thing the left always loves to do when we're talking about budgets is the Republicans will say, well, we'll give you $10 million for this. And the Democrats will say, well, we wanted 15. And the Democrats will run to the press and say, the Republicans are cutting 10 million, or we're cutting 5 million. And in reality, well, we're giving you 10. We're just not giving you 15. It's not a cut of 5. It's 10. Yeah. And, you know, I hope that message gets out. And again, credit to the speaker for getting on upfront like that.
Yeah. And I think that it's going to take more of that messaging to kind of let people know that the budget process is still going on, despite these talks not going or continuing, at least for now. But I think I am the sheer gall of the governor saying that we can't get to a place on public education. And I know we discussed the 400-year veto, but I believe that the 400-year veto is like $420 roughly a year per pupil aid increase every year. And the governor in his budget put, I think, like $440 or something. So not a really big interest. But the 400-year veto alone gets you 90% there.
Yep.
Okay? So the Republicans in the legislature could say, okay, you got your 400-year veto. We're not going to touch public education. You get 90% of what you want. And in these negotiations, how many times do you get 90% of what you want? Almost never. So I think it's, frankly, if we want to talk about good faith negotiations, I don't think that is, at least on public education. And I'm not in the room where it happened, of course, so I'm not privy to that. But I do think that the public education aspect is, frankly, ridiculous for the 400-year veto alone. Childcare, that's kind of a nebulous thing to me. The governor wants childcare accounts, which was $300 million of just direct subsidies to childcare providers, and those are running out from the feds. So the state has to backfill that. So that seems like an up or a down. I mean, I just don't see Republicans doing direct subsidies for childcare.
No, and especially I think there's always questions when it goes to the organizations providing the care as opposed to the parents. Making sure parents are the ones that are actually getting the benefit of that is probably the most important. And so what I was going to ask then is, I think, in my opinion, there's two options for the budget at this point. Now, I think I'm a bit more of a hardliner on this, is that either, and I don't know if the legislature has the wherewithal to just do no budget, but maybe just a cost to continue budget, or I think they take the opposite route. They do a hyper-conservative budget, force the governor to veto a lot of things that conservatives should like, and actually regular Wisconsinites should like a big tax cut. I know a lot of you mentioned flat taxes. I know a lot of states that are moving towards a flat tax. It is a process. It is over several budget cycles or years. Something I think that the state should consider if they can go that route. And then, again, put all the strong conservative policies you want in that budget, force the governor to veto it. Looking at things like the Waukesha County legislators coming out and asking for more DAs. I know a lot of counties are in that position, but getting DAs from more counties can force the governor to be on the side of the criminals.
Mm-hmm. And I know this is something to kind of tie in to our later conversation, but I think that we have to also consider, what are the Democrats, or what is Tony Evers, or mainly Maggie Gau's frame of reference when it comes to running for re-election. Now, I'm not changing subjects here. I'm still talking about the budget. But if you're a Democrat, if you're Tony Evers right now, what benefits you? If you're running for re-election, what benefits you? Probably the Republicans in chaos, probably not passing a budget. Are we going to try to bring, because, it seems like whenever there's a potential shutdown in the feds, it's a huge thing, of course. And, Republicans in disarray, or whoever is managing the House at the time is in disarray. They don't have a budget. The government's going to shut down. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to die.
Right.
As Hakeem Jeffries said, apparently this week. So that being said, what is their strategy? And I say, if you're the governor, you try to draw this out as much as you can, which is why I think in some respects he wanted to do these budget talks. If you do budget talks until late June, early July, just delay the matter, and then obviously maybe pull out and say, they're not giving what I want, therefore I'm coming out. So I think there's a lot of strategy to consider when it comes to the gubernatorial election, and how does the budget process affect it, and who comes out on top with no budget. And of course, this would also turn into a messaging war, which, are you confident we can do?
That's a good question. I know in the past it's never quite worked out for Republicans on the messaging side, because a lot of the press is left, and they are basically stenographers for the Democrats. And like you said, they try to create the chaos. If it isn't there, they'll try to spin Republicans not having a deal on the budget as some grand problem. And I think it's really only paid attention to by a few people who watch the news or read the papers for a couple of weeks. And I think that stuff blows over. It's just dependent on, can your rank and file legislator handle a couple of weeks where they might get some pushback on not having a budget. And, again, that's a challenge.
Yeah. And the fact is I don't know how much legislators have gotten pushback in recent years as far as, Act 10, obviously, I think that's kind of the extreme with the protests and such. So it'll be interesting. And of course, you're also considering that the Assembly and the Senate are on the same page.
Yeah,
which is a whole other conversation. And I know I'm usually speaking from the speaker's perspective, because as his strongest soldier, that's what I'm supposed to do. But I try to avoid any discussion on the Senate as much as possible, just because I frankly don't know enough to know. I know, obviously, I remember Fitzgerald being kind of somewhat of a Voss-like leader, strong leader to try to rally the caucus together, but I'm not sure if that's there anymore. So what happens in the Senate, what happens in the Assembly. Do they talk to each other? Do they manage to work something out in the JFC committee? We'll see. So other than that, I mean, I believe that the governor is kind of playing a footsie with the legislature and trying to just kind of string them along and play the, oh, well, I tried my best, but they don't want to give me a couple $1 billion in education, childcare. So, oh, well, I won't talk to them anymore.
Yeah, I remember several years ago, there was a time when the Republicans couldn't quite agree on a budget, and it wasn't going to get done by the end of the fiscal year. And, of course, that's right around 4th of July parade time. So I was walking a couple parades, and a couple people were out there heckling, saying, oh, you should be working on a budget right now and get that done. And I was kind of taken aback by people that they actually paid attention. For me, it's such an insider thing. Either you're paying attention at the end when the budget gets done, but for people to say that, I was surprised. But it was, again, it's very few people, and they're probably people that aren't voting for the guys I'm walking in parades for, and they want to give them a hard time about something, and they found it that. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to see where it goes from here.
I'm sure there'll be more.
Well, this is not
just the beginning.
Yeah, not our last discussion. But speaking of interesting bills that are coming out, the legislature, several Republicans in the Senate, including Julian Bradley and Mary Felskowski, got to give them a big shout out. And then Robert Wittke in the Assembly introduced a bill for price transparency at hospitals. And it's interesting to me in that pricing for surgeries and procedures that are done in the medical field, you have no idea what the price is going to be. You kind of just get the bill at the end. You say,
roll the dice.
Right. You get, here's what the insurance covers. Here's what you got to cover. It's 2 numbers, and that's about it after the procedure's done. So I think it's a great idea to come out and say every hospital has to list prices for their procedures. And I think we're going to see, if that happens, and because I know it's happened in other states where they started doing that, there was pretty significant price discrepancies. And then you're trying to actually save money for the consumer, which I think is the reason the left is going to hate this bill. Mm-hmm. To give more transparency to pricing means that these prices could come down and create this accessible information online for customers to find so they know what they're paying. And that means, again, prices come down without government intervention. So there's no reason anyone on the left should like this bill.
Well, and I don't know enough about the bill. I think it just came out.
Yeah, it was Thursday or Friday.
Okay, so this just happened. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues through the legislature. But it seems like so common sense that why hasn't this been a thing before? Where, hey, hospital X, how much is your so-and-so procedure? Hospital Y, how much is this procedure? Oh, well, I'm going to go there.
Yep.
Or, obviously you have to consider maybe the doctor, and maybe you get, referred to a different place, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of things to consider, but it seems like a very common thing that why haven't we been doing this before? Mm-hmm. And I see this as only as a net benefit to the consumer. Now, I have to imagine that there's going to be opposition, maybe from Democrats or the hospitals potentially, which I'm not sure why you would oppose transparency for pricing, but I suppose that they also have to watch out for their bottom line, and it's probably pretty easy if you don't have to disclose those things until the end. And I guess we almost accepted it. I mean, I haven't had that many medical procedures done, but I've done enough to get a bill, and yeah, it's a surprise. It's like, well, is it going to be less than $500, or is it going to be more than $5,000? And then, oh, well, you kind of just shrug your shoulders and say, well, let's get on the payment plan, I suppose. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of good that'll come out of this. WMC, Wisconsin Manufacturing and Commerce, support it, so they're the first ones that are jumping in line behind the legislators involved. No, and cynically, I think the Republicans that are going to be on this are in 2 camps. It's either ones that like price transparency, or ones that think the hospital association is going to give them enough money for their re-election fight.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting. But there is some more news in the legislature I wanted to get to as well.
Yes.
One of which being an article from the Wisconsin Public Radio regarding, quote, Republicans at odds with Evers' administration over who controls $171 million in interest from federal COVID aid. Now, you might be asking, why are we talking about COVID aid in the year 2025 AD? And that is a great question. But apparently, there was an audit by the Nonpartisan Legislative Audit Bureau that stated the interest on federal funds wasn't subject to any restrictions by the U.S. Treasury Department. Therefore, the audit reported that recommended Evers Department of Administration report it to the State General Purpose Revenue Fund. So, long story short, the feds gave money to the state for COVID. This money was basically free money for the governors. The legislature couldn't touch it. There was some money that the legislature could touch, but these ARPA funds were pretty much at the governor's behest. Now, there's still money, and I don't even know if we know, I don't know if the legislature knows, I don't know if anyone knows how much money Evers is still sitting on. And of course, in his last re-election the year before, here's $6 million here, here's $10 million here, here's 15 here, to all these little groups. I mean, he gave them to the baseball stadiums, and he gave it to all kinds of little groups across Wisconsin. That being said, so he's got this money that he's sitting on, and the interest is being accrued because I'm sure it's millions of dollars. And at this point, it's $171 million, which, of course, with a state budget of close to $100 billion, that's not saying a whole lot, but hey, $171 million is nothing to shirk at, especially when it comes to re-election coming up. So pretty much Evers is sitting on a slush fund that he's just growing at this point.
Right. It's the interest. The interest alone is a slush fund on top of the COVID-19 slush fund. And, I want to highlight Wimberger talked about the fact that, you can accrue interest on this and run your own shadow government. It cuts out the whole idea of the legislature controlling the purse if you just have money that you can squirrel away. And it's wild that you can have the federal government can give you that much money, that you can accrue that level of interest on it in just 5-6 years.
Exactly. So shout out to Senator Wimberger on that bill. But that is something that, frankly, a story that'll probably be here today, gone tomorrow, and more people need to know that your governor is sitting on money that's not really his, that he'll get full authority over, despite our Constitution saying that the legislature has the power of the purse, and it shouldn't be dictated at the governor's level. And unfortunately, we have the lawsuits at the Supreme Court, which are trying to erode the power of the legislature, trying to consolidate more of that power back into the executive. So it's very alarming, and I wouldn't be surprised. I do think this is one of the reasons why I believe that Evers will run again, because why wouldn't you use this as, a down payment on your re-election campaign?
100%. And then do you want to kick off that last one from MacGyver Institute? Did a great job looking into the Wisconsin Senior Employment Program.
Yes, of course. It's very interesting, something that kind of went under the radar. This was reported by MacGyver Institute on June 2nd regarding Evers DHS terminates senior employment program without warning. Up to 300 low-income senior citizens will lose their only source of income due to the Evers administration's secret and rash decision. So, right off the bat, senior citizen cancels program for senior citizens, and senior citizen as in Evers, of course. Completely underneath the radar. I don't think there was a press release for this one.
No.
Because I don't know if so originally when I saw this on MacGyver Institute's website, I said to myself, do I agree with the Evers administration? Are we cutting like a useless program here or something?
Yeah.
Is he a Republican all of a sudden?
Is this Doge being started at the state level?
I mean, I certainly didn't hear anything about it. And so this flew completely underneath the radar, and the Evers administration ended the decades-old Wisconsin Senior Employment Program outside of the budget process. So apparently this was all going to end on June 30th, and the people that were actually using the program, or the administrators that were actually using the money to give it to the seniors, basically had no idea. And I believe that the program's been around for a long time.
Yeah, so it basically looks like it hires senior citizens in temporary government or nonprofit jobs where they can gain some basic skills and subsidizes their $7.25 wage for 20 hours a week for up to 4 years. So it gives some older folks on fixed income something to do, a couple extra bucks in their pocket. So I looked at that and thought, okay, maybe this isn't a bad program. But it's also really interesting that MacGyver points out that DHS does not have an internal operating budget. And it's easy for small programs like this to fly under the radar. And since the legislature uses incremental budgeting to write the state's biennial budget, it's possible that programs like WISE, which is the Wisconsin Senior Employment Program, that they fly under the radar and go unnoticed for decades and receive funding without any oversight or transparency, which is then cause for concern.
Yeah, it's a huge cause for concern what exactly they're doing. And I don't necessarily have an answer for it. Mm-hmm. But a Democrat ending a program for seniors, meanwhile they're screeching about Republicans killing seniors that are on Social Security and Medicaid, seems a little bizarre. And especially because they ended it so quietly, not with we're closing this to save money for this or that, without a whimper, in the middle of the night type of deal. So very interesting. I don't know if that'll be anything to note going forward, especially because the Department of Health Services has not been taken up by the JFC committee, as noted in the article. So I don't know if that will. I don't even know if JFC knows about it. And the article at least mentioned that this could have flown under the radar for years, decades. So it's quite concerning, and maybe we have to. Or maybe JFC people have to take a look at that, because that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, no, I think it highlights two things. One is, like you said, it's the governor cuts senior citizen aid. It is a very easy headline and easy campaign hit. But at the same time, how many programs exist like this at state agencies that don't have any transparency, that aren't reported to Joint Finance, that aren't reported to the legislature, that are, again, flying under the radar. And that speaks to maybe the budget process and how the legislature takes up the budget, that maybe programs like this should be a wake-up call for how each division of the administration's spending their money. So I hope they take a look at this one.
Yeah, and I think that this would be a great opportunity for potentially an actual Doge. I know we have the GOAT committee in the Wisconsin legislature, and I know they did a lot of stuff regarding UW a couple months ago, but maybe we actually need to hire some people to come in.
Yes,
we need big balls to come in and do his thing for Wisconsin that they did with Doge at the federal level.
Wisconsin needs big balls.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think that would be great for a next governor candidate to maybe hop on. It's easy political fodder. So I think that leads us perfectly into...
Speaking of governor candidates, should we play a game?
Yes, please.
So the game we're going to be playing today is called Buy or Sell.
Or Hold, but you never use Hold.
Never use Hold. So I'm going to read off a list of potential or declared candidates for governor, starting with the Republican side.
Okay.
Shadow Gov here is going to lead off with his opinion on those candidates. I don't know if he's seen this full list. This list, it's a wide net. So we're going to have some fun with it.
Okay.
But we're going to start off with some obvious ones, go down to some less obvious ones. So first off, the declared candidate for the Republican nomination for governor, Josh Schoeman, county executive for Washington County.
Now, before we get into it,
yes,
I want to state for the record, when I say buy or sell, it's not an indication of an endorsement or not of endorsement.
Correct.
It's more of just
where are we at with them.
Mm-hmm. So Josh Schoeman's kind of an obvious one. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm buying because he's already in the race.
Mm-hmm. But do you think he could win?
Yes. Okay. So that's another
or
question. Or
win the Republican primary.
I think it's wide open at this point. Mm-hmm. Although I think he got a lot of press when he first entered as just kind of the nominal first candidate, but it's so early. I don't know if people are even tuning in. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know. I haven't heard much is what I'm saying is since then. And I'm not saying that's an indication of they haven't done enough or they haven't gotten themselves in. to be fair, I don't think it's hard to get headlines if you just start attacking Evers, or maybe you even go on a limb on something. You could compare Evers to Biden and probably get some decent press hits. So I don't think it's hard to get in the media, but I haven't necessarily heard anything, and I don't think we've had a filing date yet since he entered. So my biggest thing about probably going forward for him is, can he raise enough money?
Yep. So he did win the straw poll at the Republican convention last month, but I think some of that's recency bias. And, straw poll is not necessarily an indicator of who's going to come out in the primary, as Kelder Roy's learned in 2018, amongst many others.
Ouch.
Yes. But I what he reminds me of, and he actually made this comparison directly, is, he's the son of a Lutheran pastor and a county executive. And the last Republican governor we had in the state was the Lutheran pastor's son and county executive, and Scott Walker. But Josh reminds me a little bit of Scott Walker in 2006. He was ready to run in 2006, but not quite there. And then it became Mark Green as the nominee for Republican governor in the 2006 cycle. And I think it kind of worked out for Scott Walker. It worked out for Mark Green, too. He had actually carved out a nice spot as an ambassador, I believe, to Tanzania. But, Scott came in 4 years later, won the governorship. I don't know if, again, Josh seems like that could be his path. Maybe not this term, maybe next term. We'll see. Next candidate that's out there, another one who's gaining a lot of momentum, is now Congressman Tom Tiffany.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hard buy, just because, Tiffany even said that he's gonna make a decision in August. So that's gonna be here before we know it. I do believe he's gonna run, especially if the field if it's just between Josh and Tom. I can't imagine Tom not running away with it, just because it's the simple fact of congressmen having that additional constituency, whereas Josh just has the ability of being a county executive. Like, I know Josh will probably take Washington County with flying colors. Meanwhile, Tiffany will basically take everything north of Marathon County with dictator margins.
Yep.
So I have to imagine he'll buy, though. Congressman, former leggy as well, veteran of state government. He's been in Congress for a few years now. Plus, trying to bring back, the Northwoods to the capital, something that's kind of been more of a southeast Wisconsin type of thing. And he might be trying to break that mold a little bit. So, yeah, that'll be a hard buy.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical. He's a northern guy, I think, so I could pull out that. But, congressmen haven't fared well as candidates in the state, so a little bit superstition for me.
Yep.
But making it that jump to state level.
I do think the money thing is also a concern, and I think probably a money thing is a concern for every candidate.
Yeah.
Just because
almost every candidate, but it's just we need someone that can at least hang with the Dems. So he was getting a lot of hype, though. Tom Tiffany was, from a guy who's works with Turning Point Action in Ohio. I saw this tweet. Gabe, and it's an Italian last name, Guarini. Forgive me, I'm going to pronounce that wrong. We're going to link to it in the show notes. Check out this tweet. Highlighted the fact that Tom Tiffany has introduced a bill to ban DEI programs at the federal government. Among other things, he has an 89% Turning Point Action score, which is the best in Wisconsin. One of a handful of Republicans to vote against federal Juneteenth virtue signaling bill. Voted yes on Women's Sports Act. And co-sponsor the SAVE Act. So he is doing a lot of great work in Congress that should
could be good messaging for
exactly.
a primary. Now, I would like to say, just for the record, I do appreciate the things that Tom has done, but the Turning Point Action score, what was it, 89%? To be fair, Rob Coles had 100%.
And Rob Coles is a Democrat now.
Rob Coles endorsed Kamala Harris for president.
Yes, Rob Coles being the state senator from the Green Bay,
Fox Valley area,
the thumb of Wisconsin.
So just for some context, that those scores can be wrong. And what's funny is those scorecards, I used to trust them. I really don't. I usually just have to look at what bills The percentage, I think, is all kind of a shell game, but that's besides the point. So, yes, by Josh Schoeman, he's running. By Tom Tiffany, he's running.
So let's get to some other ones that maybe
Yes.
maybe not. So another one who really strongly hinting at running, didn't have a great showing, and in fact had a pretty poor showing at RPW convention straw poll, is Bill Berrien, the rich business owner who's been involved in Republican politics for a while now, but maybe not the way that a lot of people like.
Yes, so I'm going to buy this one as well, but it's not going to be a super hard buy just because it's very obvious he wants to run and he intends to run because he did the Never Out of the Fight pack, which very close to the Never Back Down pack, in my opinion, of Ron DeSantis. Now, of course, I like Ron. I liked DeSantis a lot, but I kind of see kind of a parallel between the two, not necessarily on policy or anything, but we have, he's a vet, former SEAL, I believe, businessman. He's done very well for himself. I think he's been in kind of the background of Republican politics for a number of years, but there was a very timely article from
Dan Bice.
Dan Bice, of all people. Well, what am I saying? Dan Bice is the only one that would do it, probably. So, and Dan Bice is the hatchet man for both sides of the aisle. And there were some unsavory things said about Bill Berrien regarding supporting ranked choice voting.
Yeah,
not a great thing to champion in a Republican primary.
He supported ranked choice voting, which I have some serious concerns about. He gave a lot of money, I think $30,000 to Nikki Haley, which I'm not bothered by the way some other people are. Do you want to shout out Eric Brooks, who had a very funny line, though, that said, this is what happens when you order Tim Michaels or Eric Hovde off Temu.
Yeah, that one cuts deep.
So I'm going to sell on Bill. I think the opposition research, or the opposition to him as a candidate, is a little stronger than what you'd like to see out of someone right now. He seems to have been defined in a negative light for a lot of probably rank and file Republicans.
But money has a way of talking that can overshadow those things. One Dan Bice story won't sink you, but it can be very damaging. So I think about when back to the 2022 primary, and Dan Bice did the story on how Becky had a drinking ticket when she was like 19 or something. And everyone thought it was the end of the world. And no, it's not. It's not the end of the world, even though it was a little bit of a hatchet job. So I'm buying that Bill Berrien will run. I don't know if he will win, certainly, especially with this news coming out. But I will buy saying that money alone can get him in the door with his 10%.
Sure.
Or even maybe less so. But it obviously things will continue to ramp up, so I will buy for
All
now.
right, so we'll be on opposite sides of the next one. Next guy up, State Senator Patrick Testin. He was Tim Michaels' no.
He ran for lieutenant governor.
Yes.
In that primary.
Yes.
With Roger Roth.
Roger Roth.
And
that's
the other
right.
42 lieutenant governor candidates.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sell, not because I don't like Senator Testin, but I just think with the top three names alone, I think you have, especially if Tiffany runs, I find a hard time for anyone in the North Woods or even close to that area breaking through.
Yep. So we're selling on Patrick Testin. Are you gonna sell on Roger Roth then too? Do you think he makes a comeback, or is he?
I don't know how Roger Roth can come back, unless he's just got more money to blow. Then sure, but I don't know how you basically give up your state senator, run for lieutenant governor, and lose, run for Congress. He did take second though.
Yeah.
Maybe a county executive spot, maybe.
Sure.
If he's got enough money and it's open. Okay. I don't know if I would necessarily, if there was another candidate, I don't know if I would support him over the other person, but who knows what his political future is. So
all right. So next one up, Eric Hovde.
Yeah, I'm going to sell as well.
Same.
There was that buzz. I think Hovde probably liked the idea of potentially being, but I think his strengths were probably more with the federal issues.
Yep.
So And I like Hovde, and I appreciated that he followed me after the election, but I do believe we have to start going forward. We can't run reruns.
We've talked about this in our earlier episode. We're superstitious.
We can't
about,
do that right now.
Yeah.
I don't think we can afford to do that.
No.
And it's nothing personal. That's just kind of a, hey, cutthroat look at it.
So next person up, and I think I know where you're at with this one, but Mary Felskowski. She's been doing, she does great work. We just talked about her a bunch today.
Mm-hmm. I think she would be interesting. I think she would be the most interesting of the people in the legislature. I do tend to believe, though, that it's kind of a thing. I'm assuming that I would sure hope that they would talk. Like if Tom Tiffany runs, he's going to let the state senators in his area know, hey, I'm running.
She would make a great member of Congress.
Yeah, I think. Well, if Tom runs, for sure, I think the very big primary to replace him will be a number of legislators. So I think Mary would be very interesting, though, just because she kind of has she's very conservative in some areas, but she has some moderate areas that would probably do her well in a statewide race. So I think that's the one that's the most intriguing. But I'll sell.
Okay, I'm with you. I think she'd make a great member of Congress. I don't know if she'll have the opportunity to run for governor right now. So next person up, Will Martin. Will's been doing a lot of great work.
Yes.
Behind the scenes.
Yes, he has. And I know he did a lot of work for the constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Back for was that last August?
Yep.
For the primary.
He's been a big supporter of the 1848 Project, which is Rebecca Clayfish's effort to get more conservative-minded folks running for local office. He's around. Say it like that.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see, and although I don't go to all the party apparatus, Pints and Politics or this meeting or that meeting, but I see enough to keep up with who's showing up at events, and he's been one of those that has shown around. So, I'd be interested to see if he runs again for lieutenant governor, or I don't know, maybe Secretary of State. Sure. Both are basically the same. Both don't really have all that much power. You make it what it is.
You're either second or third in line at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if it matters if he's lieutenant governor or Secretary of State, but so I'll sell on governor, but I'll buy on potentially another office holder on the ticket,
and I'll buy him as a cabinet member.
Yeah,
I think he'd be great. He served as
Walker.
Yeah, he served in the Walker administration. So, speaking of the Walker administration, thoughts on Rebecca Clayfish making another run?
I would. My heart says yes, but mine says no, and that's just the cutthroat way. And obviously, I appreciate everything that she's doing. I wish her the best, but that's probably going to be a hard sell right now.
Same.
And that's no offense to anyone. Obviously, I supported Becky in the primary in 2022. I wish her the very best, and I hope that everything works out that she wants to do.
She is just like the best cheerleader for the state of Wisconsin and Wisconsin Republicans.
And one thing I'll say, just on an off note, just because it makes me really mad, that sometimes good deeds don't get rewarded, and I just remember seeing in the primary when she was running, and it was just her at the time, or she was the only major candidate that had announced, and she did everything with helping all the school board candidates, and it was just in the spring election, and she had helped all these individual candidates across the state win, and I was like, who does that? What other governor candidate, what other statewide office candidate does that, helping out a school board race in a one-off county that no one else would know about? You would have to imagine, I would consider anybody that does that very, very high on my list, and not just thinking about themselves. So kudos to Becky.
I'd love her to stay involved. Having known her from working in the legislature, I know her time as lieutenant governor got off to a bit of a rocky start, but she adjusted real quick and really owned something that was, I think, kind of considered a joke at first, which was just cold calling businesses just south of us in Illinois, saying, "Hey, why don't you come north?" And it worked out, and she really owned that. She did an amazing job trying to travel to each assembly and Senate district, touring businesses, meeting with the local folks in those areas. I thought she was she set herself up very well. Just, didn't work out that
She
year.
made the office how she wanted to.
Yep.
And meanwhile, who is our current lieutenant governor? Do you even know?
I mean, I know because we're involved, but I guarantee you go to anyone on the street, 99 out of 100 people won't know who Sarah Rodriguez is. And I had to think about it at first because I was gonna get her last name wrong.
Well, I have all of our state elected officials on notifications because I'm a psychopath. And so that's all she does. It's post occasionally on social media. That's it. That's it. And of course, she just wants the paycheck. That's fine, I guess. I wish people took the Becky route and made it more. Even Democrats, like, why wouldn't you? I mean, maybe Sarah Rodriguez doesn't want to run for higher office, I guess, but that's on her.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got a little bit of a tangent on Becky. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
But, hey, maybe we'll have to have her on for
I would love
episode.
that.
That'd be good.
She's amazing. And so wanted to move on to our next candidate. Now we're getting to some kind of quasi oddballs. So
Okay.
Tell me what you think of this. Brittany Kinzer. It assumes, first off, that she'd be willing to run as a Republican.
Yes, that is a big assumption. I'm going to sell just because of that. And I do think as Republicans, I appreciate you putting it on there because I do think she'd be an interesting lieutenant governor candidate too.
Yeah.
Which, again, that would assume that she would want to run on the GOP ticket. But I think it would be interesting just because, I mean, I thought she ran a pretty good race and she made it closer than probably
Than ever.
Than
ever.
Which is really sad that a 6-point win is the closest superintendent race that there's ever been.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if there's a governor's race that's more than 2 points, it's considered a blowout, basically.
Yep.
So that'll be something we'll have to work on more. But I appreciate what Brittany did. I want her to stay involved. I think that the campaign changed her a lot. Because I remember I went to one of her events and she said, I'm more of a moderate, but this election has changed me. And I think she was referencing especially the ads and didn't realize how nasty it was going to get against her by people that she probably considered friends at the time.
And that was something I'd love to talk to her about, love to hear more from her on how she felt being so supported by the Republican Party and Republicans across the state. I heard her speak towards the end of that campaign cycle, and it was very endearing that she wasn't as polished as Brad Schimmel was, and then they were out campaigning together. And I liked that about her, that she seemed genuine. She seemed like a mom who just cared about making sure kids in the state get the best education they can. And I thought she did a fabulous job. She was the Republican candidate. There's no write-in or anything like that
Correct.
Needs to be talked about. She was the one, and we embraced her. And I'd love to know how she felt about being just embraced by us like that. So
she was kind of like an RFK in a way, where she was at the DNC. She probably voted for Kamala, but she was willing to put a lot of that aside and say, "Hey, I want kids to do better in school. Hey, I don't." And I know she had mentioned that, "Hey, I don't want men in women's locker rooms."
No brainer.
Yeah, but that was really the only other policy thing that she had mentioned. So I see it kind of as the RFK, where RFK is kind of nuts on guns, he hates guns, probably much of a gun grabber, but he set that aside to then focus on public health.
Yep.
So very interesting. She was at the RPW convention, got a speaking slot.
Yeah.
So I think that's stay involved. My only caveat, and then we can move on, is Republicans co-opting Democrats and then exalting them all the time. I don't think we should do this all the time.
It happens actually not just in politics, but if there's ever an athlete or a celebrity that just says something
Even
a little bit
moderately good. It's they're conservative.
Right,
they're
right.
Rock-ribbed conservative.
They said something conservative adjacent, or you see them perform with an actual conservative. You think, oh, they're the next, and then they go back to their side.
It's kind of like the Bill Maher thing, where yes, Bill Maher is not a full-throated, crazy, insane Marxist leftist, he's still pretty far left on most things, and sometimes he says things that the left doesn't like. That doesn't mean that Bill Maher should be running for RPW chairman. So that being said, that's just on a principle level. I still want Brittany to be involved.
Yeah. So next person up, we have the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, former Ashland County DA, congressman from the Northwoods. Think he comes back to Wisconsin?
I'm going to sell just because it seems pretty unlikely that you would go. He's already got the name ID and everything. He could run for governor even if he wasn't DOT secretary. So I see this as probably not upending his family to. I mean, he's still young. What's saying that he couldn't serve 4 years in a Trump administration and then run for governor after it, too?
Yep. I'm with you. I'm selling right now. I love what he's doing at DOT. Red State had this article that was Sean Duffy's war on Pete Buttigieg, and really just highlights everything that Sean's done in the first 4 or 6 months now of a Trump administration. And I think Pete spent at least 2 or 3 times this length on fake maternity leave.
Yeah, he was too busy chest feeding probably to actually do anything, or too busy, taking the bike out of the back of the black SUV to ride 500 feet to work.
Well, he was certainly too busy doing that than he was to visit East Palestine, Ohio. And, you saw a couple aviation issues and disasters that happened during the first few days of the Trump administration. And Sean Duffy was right there at everyone. So I think the level of work he's doing at transportation as the secretary is just too important for him there to come back to Wisconsin right now. But speaking of comebacks, he's a legend. So that's why I put him on here. Tommy Thompson.
Yeah, that's going to be a sell. That should go without saying, but that's no disrespect to what he's done in the past. But the fact, and this is going back to 2022, that Tommy was considering running is slightly frightening. Just based off the fact that, we just got done with Biden, and Tommy is with it. I mean, he's still doing speeches. He still gives his rousing speeches, and we should, totally respect him for what he's done, obviously, with the party. But I hope that I hope that he's not considering it, and I think his family would probably stop him, even if he wanted to.
It's really, I think, the people that are pushing Tommy are always the same, like octogenarian boomers that think it's 1992, and that Tommy's God's gift. And he, again, not taking away from anything he did.
Of course. But it's just been 30 years.
It has been
since that.
So he ran for state senate in 2012. That was 13 years ago and lost. Yeah. So not only is it a superstition thing that he lost a winnable race to Tammy Baldwin after a tough primary.
With Hovde, yeah.
But prior to that, his last election was 98, I believe.
Yeah, because he went to the Bush administration in 2000.
And McCallum finished off that, and then Doyle was elected in 2002. So, yeah, his last win in Wisconsin was in 1998. And
politics, it's not even in the same realm.
Exactly.
And so, I do struggle because when people talk about the Tommy years and like, well, he was the last one to win Milwaukee County. Why are we even considering that we would win Milwaukee County again?
There was 1 year he won everything except Menominee.
Yeah.
And that's you can never repeat that performance.
No.
And it's amazing what he did.
Yes.
It's all in the past.
Yes.
We
have to look forward.
The super old boomers that are trying to get him to do something again need to be stopped. Let's stop it right here by saying Tommy Thompson should not run.
Still
for statewide
still
office.
Appreciate what he's done, though.
Yes.
So.
And then finally, this was floated on Twitter a while back. Another legend in Wisconsin. Now, I love him still. Brett Favre.
Sell. That's a hard sell. I love Brett Favre, but I don't think, and I appreciate what he's done. We're campaigning with Trump and everything, but we do not. He's got too many problems. He's got the scandal. I don't care that the whole scandal with the Mississippi welfare program was where he got kind of set up, and he probably messed up. He probably is at fault for some of it, but the fact is, perception is everything in politics. So if you're perceived to be the bad guy, you are the bad
Yeah,
guy.
you can-
even if you are the bad, you could be, petting kittens in your ad, which is it's kind of funny. The ad with Hovde where they say, "Oh, he's a vampire that sucks your blood." Like that's what people actually believe about these ads. They see them and like, well, this is literally the worst person. This is worse than the H-Man from WW2. So.
Yeah.
No, he should not.
No. I'm with you. Again, love him. Love him as a Packer.
I don't know why we're even considered.
You're right. It's
doing
because
that.
he got a lot of hype for being pro-Trump. Love that about him too. Be great. I would still love him even if he was a Democrat, but now that he's not, even better. And you could call the Netflix documentary just a full-on hit job.
Of course.
Whether it was or wasn't. I mean, I've read Gunslinger, which is his biography. It touched on some of the stuff that was in that documentary, so it's there. The truth about his partying years are accurate, but yeah, can't risk running someone
No.
like that.
If we were, if we had 40 years of Republican control of the executive branch, okay, maybe we take a shot. Right now, it's the 9th inning. Well, no, it's like the 12th inning, and we're still down. I don't know. I don't know why we're on 12 innings, but we're down by 30 points already, and it just seems like this horrible nightmare continues on. So, no, we should not. Sorry, Brett.
All right, so we're going to wrap up there with the Republican candidates. Let us know what you think. Find our socials, send us messages, give us your takes on who you're buying or selling for the Republican nominee for governor. But let's get to a couple of candy stories really quick. This one out of the Waukesha Freeman. A Muskego woman who allegedly fled from police, landed her car in a Big Bend pond, and was shot with tactical equipment, later said she wanted to live for once in her life, according to the criminal report against her. So Amber Sisk, who's 35, who we'll put the mugshot in the show notes. Some people are saying, not me, but some people might call her a mugshotty, decided that she was going to flee an officer, resist arrest, and, of course, she might have been high, allegedly, according to the charges in circuit court. But she was caught in a it was going well above the 35-mile-per-hour speed limit when she was noticed by police, accelerated in one spot to between 90 and 120 miles per hour, according to the complaint. Again, before crashing her car in a pond. And blasting her music so loud, deputies could not understand what she was yelling back at them.
Well, in her defense, Your Honor, she was playing Freebird, so she can't be held liable.
Freebird.
Just going down the freeway, I just wanting to live. I really hope that I never get to that point where I feel like I need to lead deputies on a police chase and then crash my car while listening to Freebird. Because if I'm at that point, well, things are rough.
Yeah.
So
police fired a 40-millimeter less lethal ammunition at Sisk before unleashing canines, at which point she surrendered. But let me just say, haven't you wanted at some point to see how far you could outrun the cops? Like little
yes.
Grand Theft Auto moment.
I've played GTA, yes. It probably seems fun, but then you get a canine involved, and that probably doesn't seem as fun. But what I find interesting about that story, too, is so that they got the beanbag rounds out or whatever. Where did they not use a taser? I guess what led them to said, nah, screw the taser, we're going right to beanbags. Which I don't know what the Waukesha, or I don't know if it was the sheriff or the police department that they just went right to the beanbag routes. But I just thought that was funny. But what a rough day for
Amber.
For
and
Amber.
Again, maybe you'll log on, maybe you'll see this and think you can fix her.
That's on you.
We'll see her. And then finally, you saw this one from Milwaukee that they are canceling their 4th of July fireworks in favor of a drone show. Now, I think I've seen drone shows. They're kind of cool, but they're not fireworks. They are like, if you're going to rank things on levels of patriotism, fireworks has to be close to the 101.
Of course.
Drone shows.
It's cool.
Cool.
It's a novelty thing.
Maybe like a 4th round flyer sort of deal.
Yeah. I mean, my problem is I've seen too many videos on Twitter of the Ukraine war, and I'm just like, oh, I just look at the sky and all the drones and in the sky, and I'm like, wow, those things could be really deadly in the wrong hands. So, boy, I remember this article from last year where Milwaukee said, "Oh, we can't pay for like $1 million for." I don't even think it was $1 million. I think it was like 750.
But then
someone
there was
$500,000.
There was maybe it was a single person or a business came in and was like, "We'll give you the money. We'll let you fire off the fire. We'll sponsor it," and they still said no.
Yeah, it was a cop out, and it was all because of COVID. They shut it down originally because of COVID, and then they said they didn't have money for it. And then they had the sponsors, and then they had that excuse. So,
now their excuse is environmental concerns, which you tell me that the city of Milwaukee's environmental impact from fireworks is so great compared to every other Wow County community and Racine, like anywhere in southeastern Wisconsin that's going to have a fireworks show. Like Milwaukee's is really what's going to lower the carbon footprint enough.
Well, if Milwaukee County can deal with all the Canada wild smoke right now, you can't deal with 20 minutes worth of fireworks. Come on, get real.
And those fireworks, they're amazing. I hope other communities then step up.
Come on, it's the bombs bursting in air.
Yeah,
it doesn't get much better than that.
It's not the drones buzzing in air.
No, that's terrifying.
And that's a wrap on the episode. Hope you guys liked it. Again, send us your thoughts on the Republican gubernatorial candidates right now. For this, let's be sure to like, share, subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. Show notes can be found on our Substack, newfashionconservatives.substack.com. Follow us on X at New Fashion Pod, Facebook, Rumble, and Truth Social at New Fashion Conservatives, and send us memes, feedback, hate mail, whatever you have to newfashionpod@gmail.com. And for the New Fashion Conservatives, I'm Justin Phillips.
Shout out Governor Voss, Robin Voss's strongest soldier.
We're out.